Welcome to your channel, Dr. Gazavi. Economics and financial issues are very important. Let's go.
Sustainability of Bitcoin is money. The legislation about Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies varies significantly among different countries. Some countries, such as Algeria, Bolivia, and, most famously, China, took a strict approach, making Bitcoin and all cryptocurrencies illegal. In contrast, other countries implicitly and de facto have allowed the use of cryptocurrencies. For example, in 2015, the Court of Justice of the European Union established the exemption from VAT for converting traditional currencies into Bitcoin. Such a tax exoneration came from the EU Court of Justice, which based the interpretation of Bitcoin as a means of payment. Similarly, the Australian Central Bank governor claimed that citizens could hold any currency they wanted and transact with such currencies since no law prevented them from doing so. The case of El Salvador showed that governments could ban or barely accept Bitcoin in the economy and institutionally and formally make its acceptance compulsory. It must be stressed that Article 7 of the Bitcoin law made Bitcoin acceptance, not its use, compulsory, allowing, in a similar way, the other major legal tender, USD, to function as money. Therefore, El Salvadorian citizens and firms can pay taxes and continue to settle debts through either Bitcoin or USD. We argue that whenever a currency is not the only legal tender to be accepted to settle down debts and to pay taxes, together with the NAP, state acceptance, another feature is needed to guarantee long-term life to an instrument like Bitcoin in the money spectrum. Namely, citizens and firms acceptance. The citizens and firms acceptance represents adopting Bitcoin as a means of regular payment. Therefore, it can be interpreted more simply as Bitcoin's popularity or diffusion in transactions. Minsky, 1986, stressed the cruciality of money acceptance, stating, "Everyone can create money. The problem is to get it accepted." The Bank of Finland Economics Review, Grimm et al., 2017, describes in detail the problems linked to the citizens' acceptance of instruments of payment and money. Particularly paying attention to the money card in Finland during the 1990s. A more recent study stressed the challenges of accepting crypto and the pivotal role of trust in their diffusion. The difficulties associated with citizens' acceptance or adoption of an instrument as money are absent when only one legal tender exists. However, they are especially relevant when other forms of money are available to settle their debts and pay taxes to the government. In this scenario, external institutional pressures can also hamper money popularity. For example, in January 2022, the International Monetary Fund explicitly and openly urged El Salvador to remove Bitcoin as a legal tender. Public institutions' approach to cryptocurrencies could influence their adoption through statements, for example, by expressing their point of view on the use of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies as mainly a means for illegal, criminal, and terrorist activities with an inability to comply with social and economic valuable functions. In Australia, the Cybersecurity Industry Advisory Committee pointed out the main cybercrimes linked to rug pulling, thefts, and ransomware attacks. In contrast, the Central American Bank for Economic Integration, CABEI, a regional development bank, has provided El Salvador with technical assistance in implementing cryptocurrency. This assistance represents an important show of support, especially since the World Bank declined to help, citing environmental and transparency drawbacks. Public perception can also influence the diffusion of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. Royo, 2013, argued that many see Bitcoin as a means to challenge the monopoly of the current banks on value transactions, representing a dream of autonomy from the banking actors as intermediaries. As previously highlighted, such ideas were at the core of Nakamoto's words, representing the nature of Bitcoin itself. The broader Bitcoin adoption by other countries could also play a role in determining its stability and use in a country beyond its institutional support. The executive president of CABEI pointed out that Guatemala and Honduras are the countries that would have the most to gain if the adoption of Bitcoin lowered the cost of sending remittances. On currency competition, currency substitution, and their driving factors, Cohen, 1998, can be studied more in detail. The public perception of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies as instruments can be shaped by the enormous environmental impacts of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency mining activities. In 2017, for example, it was estimated that the annualized energy usage of the Bitcoin system was similar to that of entire countries, such as Thailand. Finally, for Bitcoin and other potential cryptos to settle down and be considered money stably and sustainably, and the establishment, success, and evolution of other digital currencies, such as CBDC, must be considered. For example, the Bank of England, 2020, suggested that cryptos would only be widely adopted if they provided functionality and efficiency advantages over existing and new payment systems such as CBDC. Conclusions. This paper explored the nature of money, especially concerning the recent emergence and rise of cryptocurrencies, particularly Bitcoin. We considered the parallel development of central banks' digital instruments, such as the CBDC. Some scholars have suggested that private digital currencies may threaten our monetary and payment systems since they constitute a new unit of account. They can be used to settle debts and might be used as a store of value too. This study's primary goal was to assess if and to what extent Bitcoin could constitute such a threat. The cornerstone was to establish if and under which circumstances Bitcoin could represent money. We examined the leading theories about money's nature and emergence to answer such a question. On one side, the commodity theorists, mainly related to the orthodox economists, consider money an evolutionary phenomenon that spontaneously emerged from barter as a consequence of society naturally seeking more efficient ways of making payments and trying to surpass the double coincidence of wants firmly embedded in barter. According to the orthodox perspective, the emergence of money is related to an intrinsic value, current or past, or an intrinsic utility related to any form of consumption, ornamental, or religious purposes. In contrast, the claim theories, mainly supported by heterodox economists, highlight how money was already present even before barter. They claim that the emergence of an instrument of payment as money is linked to its institutionalization by some authority, particularly concerning its ability to settle debt obligations and pay taxes to the government. We then discussed the main characteristics and similarities of Bitcoin to some significant payment instruments in history, carrying out a comparison with fiat money as well as with gold and face stones on Yap Island. Such analyses highlighted the common core properties that all instruments embodied to emerge and establish themselves as money, their functions of the unit of account, means of payment, and store of value, wealth. Nonetheless, even if value instability can influence an instrument's position in the money hierarchy, such instability does not invalidate the instrument's ability to function as money at a national level, provided it continues being used by citizens to pay taxes to the government and to settle debts. In light of the example of face stones, the intrinsic value was not a crucial factor shared by the instruments under investigation. Our analysis determined that the crucial common feature that all the instruments under investigation share are state acceptance, allowing all instruments to be used to settle debts and pay taxes to the state. Therefore, the previous analysis supports the claim theory underlining the state's key role, or other collective institutions, in decreeing some instruments as money to denominate enforceable debt obligations and impose taxes. With particular reference to the claim theory, we argued that currently, cryptos could be considered money in most countries precisely because of their inability to settle debts and pay taxes to the government. Furthermore, in many countries, such as the UK, crypto holders do not hold Bitcoin or other crypto assets to compare prices of goods and services, as a unit of account, pay for goods and services, as a means of payment, or store liquidity. In these countries, Bitcoin is used mainly for speculative reasons and to diversify a broader investment portfolio. Still, considering the El Salvador experience in making Bitcoin legal tender, we argue that Bitcoin cannot be easily and dogmatically rejected as money. We highlighted how through the Bitcoin law, El Salvador accepted and has made Bitcoin acceptance compulsory as a means of payment among private entities, establishing Bitcoin as a means of payment to pay taxes to the government and promoting its use through the Chivo wallet, giving several incentives to the population. We indicate that El Salvador's example shows that Bitcoin does not necessarily constitute money, by birth and by right. However, its institutionalization as money cannot be a priori ruled out and can ultimately make Bitcoin money. We also indicated that, beyond its function as a unit of account, means of payment, and store of value, wealth, two main requirements must be met for an instrument of payment to become money. The first is state acceptance since, as Knapp, 1924, suggested, a state's money is ultimately what the government accepts at public pay offices. The second essential feature is a requirement for its sustainability and establishment beyond the state acceptance, present when an instrument such as Bitcoin is not the only legal tender, is citizens' and firms' acceptance, that is, its popularity or adoption. Which different factors can influence? First, institutional pressures and Bitcoin's institutional portrait are relevant to shaping citizens' and firms' perceptions and feelings. Second, Bitcoin's usefulness and convenience can play a significant role from the public's perspective. Major advantages in this sense, in the El Salvador experience, have been the convenience of obtaining remittances from abroad and easier access to them from a broader proportion of the population. Third, the increasing environmental concerns in Bitcoin production or mining would probably shape Bitcoin adoption by the population. Finally, Bitcoin's success and sustainability might be influenced by the emergence and triumph of other money forms, such as CBDC. Cryptocurrency advocates and detractors should be aware of the positive and negative possible effects of adopting and diffusing such currencies. However, an individual's stance should not preclude them from studying this phenomenon with an undogmatic approach. Our study can be expanded in several ways. First, future investigations should shed light on the evolution of the acceptance of Bitcoin in El Salvador, as in many other countries, further investigating why citizens hold them. Second, the conditions that lead to Bitcoin state acceptance and citizens' acceptance should be studied in depth in other countries. Third, unresolved problems, such as Bitcoin uncertainty and volatility, energy consumption, and security in their use, are still major concerns that should be studied if and in which ways it is possible to provide sustainable answers. Fourth, further investigations would be necessary to assess under which circumstances cryptocurrencies could compete with the central bank money and to assess if Bitcoin and cryptos could threaten the centrality of the central bank's role. Fifth, the potential mechanisms through which monetary policy might be influenced should be investigated in the case of Bitcoin acceptance as a legal tender. Finally, this work could represent a baseline for studying other cryptocurrencies, such as stablecoins. Abstract. This paper investigates the evolution of cryptocurrencies. By nature and essence, Bitcoin challenged and implicitly threatened central bank money and its role in the monetary system. Meanwhile, central banks have been studying cryptocurrencies and launched pilot projects on their own digital currency, the central bank digital currency. Until recently, most economists considered Bitcoin merely as a speculative asset. However, the El Salvador decision in 2021 to establish it as a legal tender, through the Bitcoin law, questions the status quo perception of Bitcoin. Given El Salvador's legal obligation by the law of their acceptance, allowing tax payments to the government and debts to be settled using Bitcoin, the Bitcoin law challenges the boundaries of money. In light of the El Salvador experience, we consider different perspectives on the nature of money, allowing us to reject or include Bitcoin inside the money spectrum.
Thank you for watching, and please subscribe to our channel. Economic and financial issues are very important. See you in the next video.